Namaskar. I'm honored I am here in the TEDx talk organized by UPES. I'm here to speak on one of the very important issues which globally is the highest concern today, internationally too. That is economy and ecology. Unfortunately, there is a conflict between the two. It is economy which is booming, and unfortunately ecology is dooming. Here is one case where we unfortunately, when today we measure the growth of any nation, the country too, through a measure we call gross domestic product. GDP is and every nation in the world. It came sometime in the year when the European economy collapsed. They began with industrial revolution, and that shut the GDP as a measure of growth and which accepted by all nations in the world. So GDP ultimately became the most important tool, so-called defined development of any given nation. Every state had across the globe talk of GDP when they think and they want to offer the opportunity for others to join them through the GDP only. But the gross domestic product is in fact what? It is an indicator of infrastructure growth that we have. We have services that we have given in the given year. What is the industrial growth that we have, and a part of the agriculture. Let me tell you that agriculture was most important contributor of GDP. Sometime in our nation 70 years ago it was 40% contributing to GDP, which has stooped down hardly to 13% today. Now the GDP is not the case only which the humans should think of its welfare. We cannot deny the fact that the global warming, climate change issues are very aggressively taking up the issues of the growing economy today. The important thing which really need to be discussed and talked about is that any growth of so-called GDP take the cost of the ecology and the environment. Any industrial growth, any infrastructure growth takes the cost of the nature. And unfortunately, we have not been much able to take in the GDP that losses that we have been doing every year and every day, which ultimately we claim that the GDP we are rising by the GDP in the nation. Now let me give you some very interesting example. If the GDP is everything, gross domestic product, and the losses of the ecology and environment are not considered, the examples are in front of you. The soil, which is the most important that makes the food for all of us, in last 150 years we have lost 50% of the top soil, which is equivalent to 75 billion of the tons of the soil and equivalent to $100 billion. Now the top soil lost is not given in any GDP of any nation. Now again, when the solution was to be found out by the given nation or in the country like ours too, America and every country, what we tried simply as a solution, form of a solution, we brought the chemical industries, we brought the pesticidal industries, and that became the part of the GDP, but the loss was not the part of the GDP, and we constantly losing the topsoil. And let me tell you, we are very hazardous, suffering with the very hazardous kind of a food we are inhaling today. But again, what we fall ill because of the poor quality of food we take, not the part of the GDP. Second, take the case of the water. Water is a very important issue. You see, we cannot survive with the water, without a water. Water, globally, 1.2 billion people are suffering with the water. An economic crisis comes to the 1.6 billion people. 780 million people are suffering with the water crisis. But that is not part of the GDP. What became the part of GDP? The government brought a solution in a form of water bottle, which everybody take today. We brought solution in form of a purifier, and the loss of water was not the part of the GDP. And what became the part of GDP? The water bottle, the purifier, they became because the industry based on them became the part of the GDP. Similarly, when we fell ill, number of hospitals came, number of drugs came into the market, new drugs one after the other, they became the part of the GDP. Glacier we lost. You know, most of the rivers, you go across the world, we have been losing the river very fast, whether it is a Yellow River of China, or it is a Mississippi of the America, or it is a Chao of the Thailand, Ganga Yamuna of my own country. We are losing fast, but they are not the part of the so-called GDP. We do not have any measure where we can think of, if this is economy, where is the ecology and environmental we stand by? That's not the issue. Air, you know, WHO recent report, 90% people are suffering with the air pollution and leads to cardiopulmonary diseases, skin diseases, respiratory diseases. But when we fall because of the air pollution is not the part of the GDP. Pollution in the air is not part of the DGB, but any measure we adopt to pure the water becomes the part of the GDP, because it ultimately goes to the GDP part. What the issue is more important, if the growth, economic growth is ultimately most important, can any of us survive without a water, without a food, air? If we don't, so we must collectively think, if the GDP ultimately given by the Europeans to measure the growth rate of the any given country, we really need to think about another growth measure, that is ecological growth measure, gross environment product. We must think seriously about it. If the economic growth measure is this, we cannot survive without water and soil and air. There has to be one gross environment product which should say where we stand ecologically today, where number of river we recharges, pure the air we were able to keep pure, how much water we were able to recharge again in the river, in the pond, in the water bodies, the glacier we were able to save. Collectively, it should be placed as a gross environment product, and then only we will be called human. Otherwise, we are a greedy community, materialistic, that we could not understand the science of the nature. We adopted a science which made us more materialistic, car, air conditions, and many, many other things. But we failed to understand the science of a nature, and the science of a nature says the contributor must be consumer. And since everybody consume, everybody must be contributor, and collectively we really think together about the issues that there has to be an ecological growth measure against the economic growth measure. We in this state tried that we fought with the government that if this is the economic growth measure of this state, what should be the state, what is the status of the ecology of the state, what is the number of area they have brought more in the forest by quality and quantity, what water bodies they were able to recharge, rainwater that fall lot, not merely to bring the flood, but if we are able to conserve this water or not, what is that quantity? That should be one factor for the gross environment product and the quality of air. We were able to improve the water quality and quantity. We were able to do collectively be given, and we are very happy that government, we will be the first state in the country and the globe which will say that this is the gross domestic product and this is the gross environment product that we have. And the most important is it should not be the issues of one individual and a state and a community. It is a common issues, collective issues, because all of us need them. No one can deny the fact. And the last and the most important thing, we must see that the economic measure, gross domestic product, bring the gross disparity in the country, whereas the gross environment product, GP, everybody have to inhale the air, take a water, it brings the equity. Economic factors may bring the disparity, but ecological factors serve all. No tree says that my air will go to this and not to that, but the economic factor brings those disparity. So let us be very serious about it, that if we really need to survive in the future, we will be a country of industrial mushrooming, we will be a country of a great infrastructure available, but we will have a very difficult time to inhale air, because 90% WHO report does not have access to a quality air and quality water. So the time is now. We really need to think very seriously that whether we want to go along with the so-called GDP, which is very partial, which does not much mean to the ecology and environment, no economy without ecology is possible. A stable economy needs a stable ecology, because any development we can think of, the nature ultimately pay the cost against it. So the most important issue, which is a global challenge too, that the way we are heading, international talks are being held in Kyoto, in Paris, and many states are sitting together to talk about carbon cut emission. Carbon cut, how can best we cut the emission of the carbon? But in fact, that fight is not for the ecology. It is an economic fight in ecological disguise, which we say, and it is all we are working on a pseudo economy. You really want to run an economy including the environment is the true economy. We really need this discussion to go further, so that the way GDP is being discussed by our states head, anybody talk of and be proud of that our rate of growth is this, but at the same time that rate of growth taken the toll of the nature, which unfortunately will be very difficult to bring back, because ultimately the nature is the nature. So therefore I end up by saying that please think, consider, if you really want to survive, you can survive without a booming economy, but you can't survive without a water, without a soil, without an air. You really need them, and ultimately it is the forest which give you the three of the things which we can't survive without. So friend, that's a more important. Let us also be very serious about the kind of education unfortunately we give. It is not inclusive. It does not include in your education what is the forest, soil, water, and so on. But I think this is high time every one of us who consume, who are educated, should also be given a lesson what the nature is, what is the nature science is. We must understand the science of nature before understanding any science we are being trained for. Thank you very much. I am invited.